Hello everybody, welcome back to another Woodworking Wisdom. We are back in the craft shop today, our little crafty workshop, and we are going to be spending a bit of time on the scroll saw. We've got an Intarsia project for you guys to have a go at, which is a bit of a strange name. It really means that we're going to be cutting lots of little bits of timber and kind of bringing them together to make a collage or a mosaic of pieces of wood. So most of this is done on the scroll saw. We're gonna cut all our shapes through, and then we're going to look at how we can shape those pieces to kind of give it a bit more depth and a bit more, you know, a little bit more interest. So first things first, let's have a look at our pattern. Okay, so I've got my pattern here. This came from an Intarsia workbook. There's a really nice book. This is by Kathy Wise. This is one of her templates. Okay, and on that, so from this little template, I've cut out the pieces and I've put them onto various bits of timber of different colors. Okay, so I've got 3 bits there, and it's really important when we're laying out or cutting out our template that we take note of the grain direction. And on this, there are some little arrows denoting grain direction and also the coloring you would like on the wood. So check that book out. There's some really nice designs on there. I'm going to start off cutting out this section, so the kind of body of our seagull, and bit by bit we're going to cut each of these separate components and we're going to bring them all together and make a really nice little kind of coastal scene with it. So over to the scroll saw here. I'm just going to grab my goggles because that's really important. We're protecting our eyes. We're good to go. So I've set the hold down clamp. I've set my speed. We're going just under halfway on my little dial here. Okay, up on top of the scroll saw, I set the speeds just under half. And just going to start cutting out these pieces. With this, it's quite important that we are accurate with our cuts. So I'm not going to rush through it. I'm just going to take my time, allow the blade to do the cutting. We're not forcing this cut too hard, just allowing the blade to cut. And this is a piece of holly, a really kind of white and kind of plain piece of timber, which is, you know, the color we're looking for the body of our seagull. And I'm trying to cut actually on the line on this one. Usually with these projects I'll steer clear and cut just outside the line, but with this one we want it to be nice and accurate. I'm just cutting around this shape that we've stuck down. I tried to be very careful as well when I was cutting it out with the scissors, so the paper template itself. And if you're having a go at this, I would suggest printing off 2 or 3 of these templates, because if you're anything like me, when you're sticking them down, you get it in the wrong place and have to start again. So I've had 2 or 3 of these templates, and I always keep one whole as well. Always keep one that you can lay all your bits out on once we're, you know, once we've cut them. Now, just down in that little curve, I felt it was a little bit tight, so I'm just doing a little loop-to-loop to come back in and join that other cut. So just bringing the project down. And just getting that shape cut in there. We've got other things that we can use if we've come off very slightly. We're going to have a look at shaping this afterwards. But really we're just taking our time and just cutting our way around these lines. Again, I'm coming straight off of that angle because that wants to be nice and square on there. Bringing the workpiece right the way around. So we've got that nice, clean intersection on the cut. This is a number 5 modified geometry blade. Again, I'll nip that back off in a moment. Nice gentle pressure down onto the table of the scroll saw. And we're just making our way around our shape. I'm going to come out the cut there and just lose that piece of timber and put that to one side. And that's got a few more components on, so we'll come back to that one. Whilst it's here, I'm just going to tidy that little section up there by resting the blade. I can hear it just engaging, forming a little shoulder, and then advancing the cut along that line. Good. So what have we got left to do? So it's this cut here. Again, just form that little shoulder before I engage in the cut. Line up the workpiece. And away we go. There's a little curve in there, so let's just put that in. And then I'm going to back out of that line all the way along. I've got the scroll saw still running. And then let's just come in back up here. Now this line that I'm cutting now is the one that joins up with a separate piece. So I'm just being extra careful. To cut that nice and accurately. So I'm bringing my feed rate down and just trying to keep that bang on the line. Gentle feed pressure. And as I get to the end of the cut here, again, just laying off the pressure and allowing that just to nip that last little corner. We want that corner nice and sharp because, like I say, there's another piece of timber going to come up to meet that one in a moment. So we've got our body cut out. Onto the next bit. I'm not going to take this off yet. We've still got a little bit of information on there which I need to use. The position of the eyeball there, we're going to drill that in a moment. So leave your pattern on for the time being. And also it can be a good reference when we're setting this out. Okay, so we've got our first question.
Okay, Ben. Hi. We've got a few questions here, so if you're okay with that.
Yeah, absolutely.
First one is from Kevin. Could you go over the name of the book again that you got that source material from, please?
I think it's called, it's either the Beginners and Intarsia Workbook or just the Intarsia Workbook, and it's Kathy Wise. She's really, she does a lot of this stuff on quite a big scale as well. Really interesting work and some beautiful work she's putting out. Really recommend that. If you're into scrolling, you know, it's another way. They're a bit like puzzles. You've got lots of little components that come together. They don't have that kind of interlocking, you know, teeth and stuff that a puzzle do, but they're really nice. There are lots of different timbers. There's a great way of using up little scraps and things.
Lovely. A woodworking learner, not so much a question, just letting us know of his fondness for the subject, seagulls. He lives by the sea as well.
Lovely, yeah.
So yeah. Next one, Maria. I live by the sea, always have done. We love the gulls, and they just remember they were here before us.
That's right. I've got a bit of a love-hate relationship with seagulls. We're close to the coast here as well. We've got a lovely little town, Lyme Regis, and yeah, I've got a few tales about seagulls, but we won't go into them today. But yeah, they're lovely, majestic creatures, and the way that we're going to present this, when we stick this down onto a board, we're going to try and, you know, pick out a piece of timber that's got, you know, some of that information in already, so you'll know what I'm talking about in a bit. But they look lovely, and it's a nice little project, this one.
Another question from Kevin: does the speed of the saw blade matter?
I feel that bringing the speed down a bit gives me a little bit more control, so I don't feel like it's kind of running flat out, and also it's going to be a little bit more, you know, a little bit kinder on the machine itself. Running things flat out all the time is not always the best way, so I usually work just above halfway on the dial here, but today for this one, because I'm trying to get that accurate cut, I've dropped the speed down just a little. But so for me, the feel of it, the way, you know, if I pushed too hard of the timber, it's not going to suddenly whiz, you know, and cut through it. And sometimes I kind of overshoot these a little bit. So just bringing the speed down, it brings the kind of the vibration down in the machine. It feels a little bit more kind of controlled and stuff. So for me, definitely. And we're not going to get as much burning and things if we calm that down as well. Okay.
And Jim was asking, what glue do you stick the templates down with?
So this is the Copydex glue. It's like a rubber glue. I use it a lot in my scroll saw stuff. It's Copydex. I got it from WH Smith's. So it's widely available. And as soon as you open the lid, you'll recognize the smell. You know, it'll transport you back to primary school. It does me anyway.
Maria was asking what size and type of blade have you got there, and what's the timber thickness? Okay,
so it depends on how you want to present your project. This in here is a modified geometry number 5, which I kind of you know, I use on most of my stuff. If we're talking about puzzle pieces fitting together, I'll sometimes drop down to a 3 or even a 1. But this we're cutting the outside shapes on this Intarsia. So actually what's outside that line doesn't matter. We've got a lot of waste to play with, and the thickness or the kind of curve of the blade is not going to cut like a really wide, you know, a really wide cut. So it keeps it all nice and clean. I really like these modified geometry ones because they have that upwards facing tooth. And we're going to mount this onto a board eventually, and we don't want to, you know, spend a lot of time sanding off little fuzzy bits and stuff. Okay.
That's it for the questions, Ben. But just to say that Lily's found the link and posted it on the chat for the
Lovely.
book.
Oh, brilliant, brilliant. Okay, so what I'm doing now, let's have a little look. If we come back over onto the scroll saw here, I've just cut this body out. I need to cut out this wing. Okay, it's quite hard to see on camera, but all of these have little denotions of where the grain runs. Okay, there's a little line, you can just about make it out there, and that's to do with the grain direction. And you get some lovely kind of feathering coming across and presenting the grain in different, you know, different directions can give the whole project loads of depth, and they look really cool. Thickness of timber, what have we got here? It's about 8 mil. Okay, but that is totally dependent on you, how much depth. If you really want to round over the body and make it almost a 3D thing, you can do. This I'm keeping fairly flat because it's easier to cut. It's a little bit more free cutting, and yeah, so I've not got such a hard job of cutting through thicker pieces of timber. But remember, we've got that 50 mil depth of cut on these scroll saws. So if you wanted to go a bit, you know, a bit thicker, you can. So with these boards, that was a piece of holly I was cutting before. This is a piece of chestnut. It's got that lovely kind of open grain. It's going to look really nice on the feathering. And it cuts lovely. The wingtips, when we get to them, are in a piece of sapele, so we've got that real kind of contrast in colour. And that's a slightly thinner board. Again, we want to taper the wings off. So that was the bit that would intersect with my other piece we just cut. Okay. Sometimes, if you've got a piece of timber that's got a lot of stress in it, you can cut this shape, and actually that top part will spring away. So if you cut that one, you're not quite sure, you can see it's just lifting away there. You can always use your template and a pencil to mark out your next section. Okay, I think we can get on with that. It looks like it was cut fairly accurately. But the last one I did in that same piece of holly, there seemed to be a lot of stress in that piece of timber, and actually the kind of the ridge of his wing kind of sprang back a bit. We'll show you that in a bit. So again, just trying to keep things nice and accurate. I really like this the loop technique, which I'll show you again now. It's really good for getting nice sharp corners. We've got a really kind of sharp piece coming up, the kind of wing tip. So I'm going to overshoot that cut. I'm going to turn the whole piece of timber, because we've got all this waste, and almost come back on myself to get that super sharp bit. One thing that can happen if you're using that technique is one of the little pieces of timber can fall down into the extraction bit. So I'm going to come back along there and see if I can't ping that out. There it goes. Okay. So the blade just picked that up and chucked it out without me having to reset any of my height adjustments and pick it out from underneath. I kind of forced it onto the blade, and that lifted and kind of pinged it out. Well, it's really important to wear your goggles. You know, although, you know, a scroll saw is a very safe machine, there are those little instances where, you know, a piece of timber could come flying off or splinter off. You've always got to protect your eyes. Good. So just while we're here, let's offer that up, and you can see how that piece of holly has really sprung away from our wing. They're all cut on the line, so you know, as paper, that should come up nice and close there. So what I'm going to do while it's here is to just bring that wing edge up over the top of what I've already cut. And I'm going to get my pencil, or I've got a biro here, a little pen, and I'm just going to make sure that that's nice and flush there. Get as much of that timber in the picture as possible, and then just scribe a fresh line in there. Okay, and you see quite a lot of that kind of movement or tension in the piece of wood. And then we're just going to trim that off. There is a little bit of patience and a little bit of kind of clean up with a project like this. There we go, we've got a slightly better fit there now. And when I glue that in, I'm going to put a little bit of pressure on, perhaps a little kind of spring clamp, and that will go together nicely. I've seen a technique as well where people cut both pieces together. We haven't got a massive gap down here, so I'm fairly happy with that. What I may just do is trim that when we get to it with a bit of sanding, because you can see there's a bit of a gap here. Okay, that top line is nice and flush all the way along now, but we've got a gap here. We'll do that using a different tool. Okay, but if there's a big bit, if it's really off kilter, then you're going to want to just finish that up on the scroll saw. What else do we want to do here? I think I'll cut the beak, just so we've got a few components that we can play around with, and then we'll start to look at shaping. Backing up through my cut there because I want that nice and sharp here. I'm holding this in a bit of a funny way. Normally my hands would be a bit more over the project, but then you wouldn't be able to see what we're doing. So just use that edge of the board to push that component out of the way. And now we've got a tiny little piece, not much to hold on to here. So what I may do is I'll use a bit of the offcut, and I'll use that as my hold down. This one's guiding, this one's holding it down on the table so it doesn't fling up at us. Okay, so just get eyes on where that join is, and bring that right the way around. Using my little hold down stick. And again, just let that cut its way out. Don't put too much pressure on the blade so it forces out and creates those little splinters. We want a nice sharp cut there. So that's his beak. Okay, so it's got a few more questions.
Yeah, Maria's just asking, do you ever use the scroll saw sander blades, or are they as rubbish as people say they are? So I'll just say that again.
Yeah.
Maria's just asking, do you ever use the scroll saw sander blades, or are they as rubbish as people say they are?
They're useful for certain jobs. I find you have to put a lot of tension on them, otherwise they get a bit of a bow. Okay, when you're sanding, you're physically putting a little bit of pressure on, and that will kind of bow the little sanding blade, we'll call it. And what that will do is give you a bit of a belly on these pieces, and that we can't have that with this project. They need to sit up nice and flush to one another, and when we shape them in, that you haven't got that big gap. You could use them. We're going to show you a few different tools that which I like to use when doing these projects. I really like the kind of Rotary Tools, and you've got that kind of nice control, and you can, it's all in your hands there, and you can offer the piece up, say, right, that doesn't fit, and sand a little bit more off. But no, I haven't used them a great deal. There was a couple of projects, and there's a couple of things, which no other tool would get into that little space where they're useful, especially if you're in sanding like internal little cavities and things like that. They're really good for that. But yeah, I'm not a big fan of them, to be honest. Useful for if you've got them for a certain application, though. I think we'll cut off one of these wingtips, so we've got at least the body and the full wing on one side. Let me just double check. That one's 4. That's good. So we can cut this little one off. So we're coming on to our piece of dark sapele now. Let's keep our beak, and I'll put that over onto our template. We'll start to build up our little seagull, and then we can talk about shaping and things like that. Obviously, today I'm not going to cut the whole project on the scroll saw. You can see what we're doing here, but really important we look at that shaping. Again, just backing up that cut, and we're starting a fresh one here. Okay, good. I'm going to cut my way out the other side rather than backtrack up there. Okay. And better to keep it as a bigger piece of wood. You've got much more grip and much more purchase on that, rather than if I had that as a scrap and stuck that on there. That's going to be really difficult to kind of guide through the scroll saw. So bring it to the edge of the board, but keep the board a bit bigger. So you're not cutting off lots of waste. You're making the most of your piece of timber, but also you've got that kind of luxury of being able to guide it around. Okay, so let's have a little look. Let's go back over to the bench here. I've got a couple of things I want to show you. First off, we've got our template, our original template, which I've again photocopied out straight out of the book, and I'm just going to start to lay out our little seagull. Okay, so you can see we've not done lots of cutting, but I think it's quite obvious how that's done. You carry on and cut all of these little pieces out, and then kind of combine them and put them together to make our full picture. Okay, so another question.
Yeah, just before we move away from the scroll saw, David was asking, should you use dust extraction when you're using a scroll saw?
You should really, yeah. I'm a little bit naughty. You should use dust extraction. We've got a big port on this one, just under here, so it takes it away from source. I've been over the scroll saw probably for about half an hour or 20 minutes of cutting, and I've not really got any dust on me up here. It's not a lot of airborne dust. You could have an extractor, a dust mask. Usually I would go with a dust mask, but yeah, you should really extract from that.
And Ian was just curious. He says, why didn't you do the small cuts whilst you had a large piece of wood, and do the bigger cuts whilst you had more to hold on to?
On these little bits. So I kept it on the big piece of there. I think, what one did we do where we had a little component? Yeah, no, I think we kept it big for that one. And I would do, you can plan this out, so you can do this cut first, then this cut, and then that one, and then it's all part of the same piece of timber. Okay, if you were to cut this one first, you will end up with a little bit like that, which is quite difficult to cut. The beak I struggled with. That's what we were talking about. I don't know. So I think sometimes you just get in the flow, perhaps take the wrong turn, and But generally, we want to keep them, keep the timber as big as you can for as long as you can. Okay, so actually, let's cut a couple more pieces before we crack on. I want to do that little white one, and I want to do a leg. So let's do this one. And then we can start to put the whole thing together. So it's that one there. So let's listen to my own advice and do this little cut first. Again, I'm trying not to get my hand in front of the camera. So it may seem a little unusual the way I'm holding it, but there we go. I've cut myself a little bit of clearance there to spin the blade in. And then we're going to overshoot that cut and then just bring it around nice and fast to give us that rounded edge. So up the top here is where it tucks into the body. So again, being extra careful just where those two bits are going to intersect. I'm coming back up the project and I'm going to make a little U-turn there to bring that around. So we're approaching this next angle where the blade wants to be. Okay. Again, I'm just going to cut my way out so we don't have to spend too much time resetting things. There we go. That's that the kind of top of the leg. Doesn't matter if you get the odd little kind of cut like that. We can blend all those in just a moment. So that's going over with my little pile of goodies onto the template. And I think we'll cut out one of these legs. It's the long one. That's why it's always good to have the template close by. So you can just make that little check. Always that off there. And then we can just do this one cut. We've got our nice big piece of timber to handle. And again, just a nice slow feed and a gentle downwards pressure onto the table. We don't want this lifting up and flattering about. It's going down at the end of the cut, so it cuts its way out and it's not forced out. So off with the scroll saw, and let's just come over to our bench here. So here's our seagull coming together. And I'm just kind of roughly laying it out onto our template. Okay, so we've got kind of half a seagull on the go, and we've got some nice variations in color once I pull that that off. Now I've made myself here a little a little sticky board. So I've got double-sided sticky tape. And what I'm going to do is just put the components down on there. I've put the rough outline of this bird on here. So again, I'm not, you know, guessing at what goes where and things like that. This can be a little bit of a pain to separate the two bits. We've got this kind of waxed carrier that holds this double-sided tape on there. Okay, so that is our little kind of shaping board, if you like. So I'm going to put our bird on here. Where's he going to go? About there, roughly. And I'm just going to push that down. Okay, it's got a really good grab, this double-sided sticky tape. Our leg's going to come in here, but I'm leaving quite a big gap between the two pieces, and then that's going to allow me to you know, to sand all the way around it, roughly kind of putting them where they're going to be on the bird with a, like I say, that big gap. That's going to come in there somewhere. But what I'm looking to do is just give myself room to come in with this tool in a moment. Okay. And then we've got our wingtip across there. Good. So we've got a few components cut out there. Like I say, there are a few more to cut, but we just won't get time to do that all today and look at this shaping, which I think is actually the more important part of this demonstration. I'm going to drill in that eye now. So we've got a 4mm lip and spur type drill bit. These are really good because you can get centered right on the pupil of the eye there. Let's just pop the speed up on that one. And I'm not going to go deep with this. I'm not going right the way through. But what we'll get is those little spurs are going to cut a nice clean outline. And that spur, the little point in the middle, is going to give us our kind of pupil. Okay, that's good. And we are going to pull off that glue so we can lose our template now. So this should just all peel off. That Copydex glue, nice and easy. Just roll it off. And I use this glue because it doesn't penetrate into the timber. A PVA would sink right in and, you know, fully bond that piece of paper to it. A little bit fiddly, but that's all part of it. And of course, you could do this on a bigger scale. You could scale this up. You know, if you're printing things off, check the ratio, make it bigger. These make a really nice statement. And because they've got that little kind of 3D element, they really kind of catch the eye. Good. So we've got a few components there stuck down onto our board. Hopefully we can see the difference in colors. We've got this slightly darker chestnut. We've got our sapele here, and then this quite nice white holly. So it's a blend of using different timbers. You could stain these. I like to use the different colored timbers. I just think it looks a little bit nicer. But of course, you can stain and color these things. I wouldn't paint them, because then you're going to start introducing extra thickness and things like that. So my little rotary tool here, this is just the hand piece of a bigger unit. If we can go back onto camera 1, Jason. So this is the motor unit that's driving the little hand piece, okay? And on the floor under the table here, I've got a pedal which will just bring that to life. And it's you know, pressure sensitive. So the harder you push, the faster the tool goes. Okay, so a really nice little bit of kit, this one. Okay, before we get going, got a question.
Yeah, just one question here. This is from Woodwork Learner. We talked dust extraction earlier and dust masks. What about, like yourself, if you've got a beard, what's the solution really?
So I've got one of the APF 10s. I'm just going to go off camera just for a second. I'll grab it and show you. So I got you know, one of the APF 10. This is a really good respirator. What this does is it pulls in the air here, where it's filtered, and it just blows cold filtered air straight into your face. Really good for things like power carving, which we're kind of doing on a very small scale here. But all those kind of power carving things, because of that rotary action, they tend to throw the wood dust into the air where it's really dangerous. I felt I could get away with it on the scroll saw because the blade is pulling the dust almost through the project and onto the floor. So I'm you know, happy on the scroll saw. But when it comes across to here, I've got an air filter nice and close, and I've also got my dust mask. These are really good unless you're presenting to camera, where it can become really difficult to kind of communicate. But certainly do a lot of arbor-teching, you know, chair shaping. This is a real godsend, and it's especially for us, you know, if you've got a bit of a beard on. A dust mask is never going to give you a full seal. So even though, you know, these could be rated up to, you know, 99% dust filtration, with your beard, that throws that statistic out the window. So something like this, where it's positive pressure in here, will keep all the dust away. So if I'm doing something really messy, I'll go with this. Again, really lucky in here. Got the little AC15 AFS. So that's an air filter, and I'm going to bring that project nice and close to that, and hopefully it will draw all the dust away. I've got my dust mask there as a backup. Let's just pop that away. Okay, so another question.
A technical question here from Maria. She's asking if the FLEXI-SHAFT for the WECHEER will fit the Dremel Fortiflex.
I'm not too sure on that one. They're usually fairly compatible. But yeah, if you wanted to send us a picture of your Dremel, we can see if that fits. It's the thread here that's the important bit. Okay, that's where it's you know, they're going to connect. I'm not sure off the top of my head. Sorry, Maria. But Dremel's going to do much the same job. You know, this has got a little bit more oomph than the Dremel, but you know, a little bit. Take your time with it. It's going to do the same shaping. It's the same rotary action. You know, this is just a kind of a beefed up version of, if you will. That big motor unit gives you a little bit more. You know, you can take off a little bit more material. You can use, you know, the harder burrs to use, but they're doing exactly the same job. And on this project, there's no reason to go up. You don't need that kind of grunt that this machine provides. Okay, so a little bit on shaping. Let's have a look at shaping. I just want to move some of my bits here because I've got a little air filter. Okay, and I'm just going to bring it this way so we're nice and close. On that up full speed. And that's blowing my template away on the other side. So, sorry, I just want to have a little tidy up so everything's nice and clear. I'm going to bring my pedal across. And like I say, nice and close to our extractor. And once I press the pedal in, we can start to soften these edges. And just almost putting a 45-degree chamfer on. By presenting the tool at different angles, you can start to smooth out those kind of flats we're producing. So this is great. This is pulling all the dust away from me. I can't smell it. That's the big kind of telltale. And I'm just softening these edges all the way along. And you could use all sorts of stuff. I'm using a little, these are the PROXXON sanding drums. This handpiece has got a like a Jacob's chuck, a drill chuck on it. So you can put all sorts of little attachments, any of those Dremel attachments you can put in there. A really useful little tool, this one. The big burrs, the SABURR saber-tooth burrs, love those. But I like this little sanding drum. It gives you a nice kind of control, and you can see quite quickly we can start to shape these components. This will even, if you want to bring, you know, the thickness of the material down, you'll spend a bit of time back and forth, nice and flat. That's brought the thickness down, and then we can shape it in. And what that's going to do is bring it down below this piece. This piece we want to bring down below that, and it will give it that kind of depth and shape that we're looking for. Really difficult to hold little components like this. That's why we've made this kind of sticky board for it to sit on. Really nice and easy to move about them. But you could, you know, just have one that's ever so slightly bigger than this. You could bring the whole project together and do it, you know, on a different kind of a different machine or tool. Colin was using the belt and disc sander yesterday. When we start to scale these projects up, you could use that to put all sorts of shapes on. You could bring this all together so it's nice and tight and kind of as one piece, and then present that and you know, sand all the bits together in one go. So there's all sorts of stuff we can bring to this, and you could hand sand it. I usually finish these off with a bit of abrasive. We're not hanging around too long in one area because you'll tend to burn it. The friction with the abrasive. So I'll bring this onto a different camera in a moment and show you what we're trying to achieve and what we've done here. Okay, so that's my preferred method of shaping. And of course, like we say, you can use those little carbide cutters, the little burrs, things like that. You could bring your knife to this. So I've got a little flex cut, you know, type of knife. You could shape it, whittle it, give it a nice texture using your knives. A bit of abrasive, just with your hand. Taking that back and forth, you'll soon start producing around if you've got a you know, a rough piece of abrasive. Let me bring this onto our camera here, on camera 2, and I just want to show you some of the roundness that we've made. Okay, so you can just see that little radius we've put on the ring, on the wing up here, and kind of softened it in so it hasn't got that kind of hard edge like we see on the beak there. Okay, it just softens it in and gives it that kind of feeling. And if these are at different thicknesses, they cast shadow on one another and give it that real kind of feeling of depth. Okay, so I'm going to jump forward now. We're going to fast forward and just turn the extractor off. But like I say, there are many different ways you can shape that, mostly through abrasives, but the rotary tools are great. But you could whittle it, you could use your knives and things, all sorts of ways of shaping that. Belt and disc sander, you know, fantastic for throwing quick shapes on things. Or you could use your little abrasive wheel on the lathe. Something I just want to show you, this is one, you know, in true Blue Peter fashion, one we prepared earlier. Okay, and you can see we've just softened all of those edges. We've taken down some of the depth, so there's a bit of a step here. And one bit I just wanted to show you, the last little bit we got to get to. Let's see if we can get this up on camera. On this leg, we've got a little bit of a square edge going on, whereas this one has all been hand sanded in, just using the edge of the abrasive. So we're going to just soften that a little bit more, get that nice and round, and then we'll chuck some oil on this. It's going to come up a lovely little picture. So let's do it on the scroll saw actually, because that's I think the kind of closest camera to. So a bit of 100 grit, and I'm just taking that back and forth across our little leg here. Let's come up a bit closer. So being careful not to scratch our backing board. This is all glued down now. And with the gluing, I would suggest, you know, a very small amount. I use the Titebond Red or Titebond 1. And that's got a really good kind of initial tack. It holds it in place and it's not kind of scooting around the surface. So that's the glue I would recommend. And what we don't want to do is have too much. We don't want that overspill onto our kind of backing board, because that can that will resist the oil when we put an oil on it. Okay, so I've just softened that in. I'm just going to quickly go over with the 240 grit as well. That was 150. This is 240, just to bring that kind of level of finish up a little bit. Okay, so that's the kind of finishing touches for the sanding. Everything else I'm quite happy with, and we're going to chuck a bit of oil on that now. Okay, I'm going with the food safe oil because I want this to be, you know, I don't want to mess around with the colors too much. So let's come over to our camera 3 here. I'm going to use our new one to kind of prop the other one up. This is a chestnut food safe oil. And like I say, this is a very clear oil. It doesn't have that kind of amber that you get with some of the finishing oils and the Danish oils. So it's a very kind of, it's not going to change our colors too much. It's going to bring out all those dark colors, but it's not going to kind of yellow or, you know, bring that amber into the white of it too much. Okay, being quite generous with the oil here. And you'll start to see all of those different timbers starting to kind of shine out. All the different colors will start to come together. And I picked this piece. This is a bit of spalted beech as a backer. Quite decorative, but I felt with the seagull being white, it gives that nice kind of contrast against the seagull there. And also it's got these things, you know, quite often if you look at a piece of wood, I'm imagining a little sunset here, and we've got a little beach running at the bottom there with a sandy little beach. So quite often the backing board will have its own little story to tell, and it just add that little bit more interest to the project as a whole. Being quite liberal with it, just working it in a little bit on the edges, and then I'll wipe off the excess before it dries. And you can build that up if you want. If you feel it needs a bit more of a sheen or you know, a little bit more luster, you can always add in some you know, another layer of oil. Okay, that's brought that board up really nice. A bit of blue roll, and just going to wipe off. We don't want it kind of pooling in any areas. So where the board meets the project, I'm just getting in there, making sure we've got rid of all the excess. That spalting, this board is really kind of dry. It's sucked in the oil quite quickly, whereas on the project itself, I can still see a little bit of that product just pooling in. So we'll wipe that over. And take a bit more time and care than I am here. Good. So that's our little Intarsia Seagull. You can see there's a little bit of oil still picking up on the lights. So I'm going to just wipe that back. I'll see if I can bring it over to this other camera. Okay, so there we go. That's our Intarsia Seagull. A really nice project. Look really nice on the wall, especially if you're living in one of these little coastal seaside places. Yeah, that's it. Okay, quite pleased with that one. He's come out nice, and that board's come out lovely. Okay, so thank you everybody. This has been Woodworking Wisdom in our little crafty workshop. We'll see you for more of the same soon.